We are. Such a trouble are free. Memories supposed to land without you. Walk out when times get deep. Be right there, folks. Just getting everything settled up. Today we're going to talk about a few things. Some fun things, some strange things, and just some things. But I'm Brooke Rose. This is Brooke Talks. And welcome. We'll get right into it. Set this up a little bit. Live chat. Yeah, we're going to talk about a couple things. So let's get right into it. Excuse me. Hi, Debbie. Gosh, you're so fast. You do that so fast. Okay, so let's do what we're going to do. I'm trying just an afternoon little broadcast and see how it goes. Okay, so oh no. Hold on, I got the wrong thing. Something most of us rarely say out loud. It feels everyone is talking and nobody's listening. Not really. We live in a time where information moves faster than ever before. News travels instantly, opinions travel even faster. And now somehow, understanding moves slower than ever has. Look around. Every conversation feels like a debate. Every disagreement feels like it's personal. And every opinion feels like it has to defend. Not discuss, defend. There used to be a difference between talking and performing. Now, those two things kind of have blended together. People don't just say what they think. They say what they think will sound right to the people watching. Because now, there's always an audience, even when you're just talking to one person. Social media didn't create this, but it amplified it. It rewarded certainty. It rewards conflict. It rewards being, loud. What it does not reward is changing your mind. And that creates a strange problem. Because changing your mind is how people learn, right? Isn't it? Think about it. When was the last time you saw somebody say, you know what? I was wrong. Not sarcastically, not defensively, just honestly. This almost never happens anymore because being wrong feels dangerous now. Really? And when people feel threatened, they don't listen. They project. They dig in. They double down. Even when the conversation stops making sense. The irony is, most people are not trying to be bad. Most people are actually thinking they're helping. They want to be seen as good, as informed, as on the right side of things. But when being right becomes more important than being accurate, discussion dies. And you can see everywhere, politics, culture, technology, even everyday life. Simple conversations turn into contests, not about truth, about winning. And winning conversations is easy. You raise your voice. You simplify the other person's argument. You make them sound extreme. You get applause. But nothing gets solved. Because real understanding is slower. It requires sitting in discomfort. It requires hearing something you don't like and you don't necessarily want to hear. Right? But don't act immediately. That's kind of the hardest part, especially now. Pause. Technology made communications instant, but instant communication removes reflection. There's no pause anymore. The moment to think, maybe I misunderstood, everything is reactionary now. Immediate, emotional, permanent. Pause. Just pause. And here's where it gets interesting. People today have more access to information than any generation in history. Yet people feel more confused. Not less, because information without trust doesn't create clarity, it creates noise. So, people choose sides instead of sticking to the truth of things. They pick a side where they feel safe, right? But sides feel simple. If a side is right, I don't have to think as much. I don't have to defend. But if it isn't simple, most problems live in the middle, the gray area. And the middle is uncomfortable because nobody cheers for uncertainty. There used to be value in saying, I don't know. Do you remember that when people would say, I don't know, I'll look into it, or I don't know, educate me, kind of a thing? You never hear that anymore. It sounds weak. Some people pretend, certainty, and pretend certainty spreads faster than truth. You can see it in everyday conversations. Friends stop talking about certain topics. Families avoid certain discussions, not because they hate each other, but because they're tired. They're tired of everything turning into conflict. And that's the real cost. Not disagreement, silence. When people stop talking honestly, society doesn't get, calmer. It gets divided underneath the surface. The strange part is most people actually want the same things, right? Stability, respect, a sense that, make things simple again. But the way we talk to each other pushes us further apart, not closer. So maybe the problem isn't that people disagree more. Maybe, just maybe, the problem is that people forgot how to disagree without trying to win. Think about that. Because disagreement used to be normal. You could argue, laugh about it later, right? And move on. Now disagreement feels like judgment, like identity, like a permanent label. And when everything becomes identity, every conversation feels like survival. That's exhausting for anyone. So here's a simple thought. What if being right isn't the goal? What if understanding isn't the goal? That doesn't mean agreeing with everyone. It means listening long enough to understand why they think the way that they do. That alone changes the tone of a conversation, slows things down. It removes the performance, and it brings people back into reality instead of into terms. Because at the end of the day, most people aren't enemies. They're just trying to make sense of a world that's changed, and it's changed very quickly, faster than anyone expected. And maybe the most honest thing someone can say today is simply, I might be wrong. And guess what? That's not a weakness. It's a strength, a curiosity, a starting point. Because once people stop performing being right, they can start learning again. And once people learn again, conversations become useful, not just loud. That might be the one thing we're missing, that we're missing most of all right now. Not information, not intelligence, just a willingness to listen long enough to understand. And maybe today, that's where we start. You tell me. So, that was our second topic tonight. Something else I want to talk about. Something a lot of people are feeling lately, but nobody seems completely sure how to explain it. There's a quiet feeling going around that somehow things used to be better. Not perfect, just better. Simpler, cleaner. You hear it everywhere. Now people say they miss how things used to be. Old music, old movies, old conversations, even old versions of the internet, right? Can you believe that? There's old versions of the internet. There's one question that's interesting. Was life actually better before? Or does it just feel that way now? Right? Because memory is strange. We don't remember everything. We remember moments. We remember feelings. And over time, the rough edges disappear, right? Nobody remembers the boredom. Nobody remembers waiting. Nobody remembers how inconvenient things used to be. They remember connection. They remember time moving slower, right? And slower matters more than people realize. When life moves slower, you have time to process things, time to think, time to let moments settle. Now everything moves instantly. Messages arrive immediately. News changes hourly. Friends appear and disappear in days. There's no space between events anymore. And without space, everything feels overwhelming. Technology made life easier almost every measurable way. Information is instant. Entertainment, endless. Communication is effortless. And yet people feel more tired, more anxious, more distracted. That contradiction is worth paying attention to because it tells us something. It tells us something very important. Convenience doesn't always create satisfaction. Sometimes it removes the very friction that gave things meaning. Think about how people used to experience music. You bought an album. You listened to the whole thing. You knew every track. Now music is infinite, available instantly, and somehow less memorable. The same thing happened with movies, with television, with conversation, with everything is available all at one time. Nothing feels special, right? You used to create value. We used to take our recorder, put it next to the radio, and wait for our favorite song to come on just in time to hit record and try to get the whole thing just so we could have it. It was the only way to do it. It's the only way that we could possibly get it. There was no other option back then, but were things better because they were limited? And then there's the internet itself. Early internet culture felt smaller. You recognize usernames, right? Communities felt personal. Now the internet feels enormous, anonymous, performative. Everyone talks all at once. And when everything becomes public, people change how they behave. Like I said before, they perform more. They say what gets approval. Not always what people think. That changes how the conversation feels. They become less honest, more cautious, more strategic. So when people say they miss the past, sometimes what they're really saying is this. They miss authenticity. They miss conversations that weren't recorded, judged, or shared. Right? Because everything you say now is shared in one way or another. But nostalgia can also trick us. Because the past had problems too, plenty of them. Less access to information, less opportunity. For people, fewer choices, right? Lots of fewer choices. The difference is those problems felt normal at the time. Today's problems feel constant, visible, impossible to escape. You wake up and the entire world is already in your pocket. What's the first thing you do when you wake up? I pick up my phone and scroll. I check my YouTube channel. I don't think I'm alone in that. And every argument, every opinion, before you've even had coffee, that changes how people experience reality. The brain isn't built to process global problems every single day. So people look backwards instead. Excuse me. Not because the past was perfect, because it felt manageable. There's also something else that's happening. Identity used to be more local. Your town, your job, your family, your circle. Now identity is global. I know more people across this state and actually across this globe than I've ever known in my life. People from all over the world say, hi, Brooke. It's great, but it's weird at the same time. And When you comparison, it creates dissatisfaction in some ways. No matter how well you're doing, someone else appears to be doing better, living better, looking better, winning more. That illusion didn't exist in the same way before. You compared yourself to people you actually knew. Now you compared yourself to millions. So nostalgia becomes kind of a refuge, a mental place where things felt understandable, where life had clear boundaries. But here's the important part. The past isn't coming back, and it shouldn't. Progress solves real problems, medical advances, access to knowledge, opportunities that didn't exist before. Those things matter. The real question isn't whether the past was better. It's why the present feels harder. And one answer might be this. We gained speed faster than we gained wisdom. Technology moved quickly. Human habits didn't. We still need rest. Still need silence. We still need conversations that aren't competitions. But the system around us rewards constant activity, constant reaction, constant engagement. And people feel that pressure, even when they can't explain it. It just says things felt better before. Maybe what they mean is simpler, not better. Life just felt more human in the 70s, less optimized, less efficient, more imperfect. I'm starting to think that living in those eras was something that nobody's ever going to experience again. We had our good moments and our bad, but they were ours. I don't feel like anything's ours anymore. I feel like everything is everyone's. But imperfection creates stories. Waiting creates anticipation. Limits create anticipation or appreciation. When everything becomes instant, experience becomes disposable. And disposable experiences don't stay with us. That's why older memories feel stronger. They require effort, presence, attention, right? So yeah, nostalgia isn't really about going backwards. It's a signal that sometimes modern life feels out of balance, too fast, too loud, too constant. Pause and make the situation, pause and maybe the situation reflects progress. Maybe choosing where to slow down, choosing what deserves attention, choosing what deserves silence, right? Because the past felt slower, but time itself didn't change. We did, our habits did, our expectations did. And once you see that, the conversation changes. It's no longer about, wishing for yesterday. It's about deciding how to live today. Maybe people don't actually want the past back. Maybe they just want to feel present again, to enjoy something without, documenting it, to talk without performing, to experience moments without immediately moving to the next one. You remember when all the memories were in a photo album? You sit down at somebody's house and you thumb through a photo album because that was the only way to relive the past. Now, every second of the day is the past. People record their life from breakfast to dinner. There's nothing sacred to hold in a book anymore. I miss that. But that requires attention. It requires stepping out of the constant stream once in a while. Because progress keeps moving forward. It always will. The real question is whether we move with it consciously or just get carried along. And maybe that's why nostalgia feels so powerful right now. Not because yesterday was better, but because today feels unfinished, unsettled, still figuring itself out. And maybe that's okay. Every generation feels that at some point. The difference now is we're all feeling it at the same time. Right? Connected, watching. The change happens together. So instead of asking where we peaked already, maybe the better question is, What part of our past was actually worth keeping? And now, do we bring those forward without losing everything that we've gained? Because the goal isn't backwards, the goal is forward, without forgetting what made life feel real in the first place. And that might be the conversation people are really trying to have right now, even if they don't have the words for it yet. I told somebody the other day, some of the best advice I've ever gotten, don't forget, you're living the good times right now. So I have one more topic I want to cover here, and then we'll wrap it up. Why do Americans disagree so much, so deeply about borders, benefits, and the future? In the country, there's a question many people are asking right now. How can something seem obviously harmful to one group of people and obviously compassionate or necessary to another? How can the same policies be viewed as common sense by some and dangerous by others? The answer is not unusually ignorance. It's perspective. And more importantly, it is disagreement about what the country is supposed to be. In the United States, political disagreement today is less about single policies and more about competing priorities. Both sides often start from different assumptions. If the starting point is different, the conclusion will be different too. On immigration and the borders, for example, one side tends to prioritize order, stability, and sustainability. The argument is straightforward. The country has finite resources. Schools, hospitals, housing, insurance systems operate on budgets. If population grows faster than infrastructure or tax revenue, systems strain. From the perspective, strict borders are not about hostility towards immigrants. They're about maintaining function. The concern is that generosity without limits eventually harms both citizens and the people arriving. The other side begins from a different starting point. It prioritizes humanitarian responsibility and economic dynamics. The argument here is that the United States has historically grown, right, through immigration, and that new workers contribute taxes, labor, and long-term economic growth. From this view, it's hard not to say that we should just have open borders. Let them all in. Policies can appear short-sighted or normal inconsistent, especially for a country built by immigrants. That focus is less on immediate cost and more on long-term contributions and moral obligations. People, this is where the conflict becomes emotional. One side sees risk and sustainability. The other side sees compassion and opportunity. Both believe they're protecting something important. The disagreement also reflects different ideas about government itself. Generally speaking, the political left tends to believe government should play a stronger role in reducing equality and providing social support. The programs involving healthcare, education, or social services. And the services are viewed as investment in stability. The assumption is that helping people earlier prevents large problems later. The political right tends to emphasize limits on spending, limits on government power, and limits on dependency. The concern is that expanding benefits too broadly creates long-term financial obligations that future taxpayers cannot sustain. From this perspective, personal responsibility and market solutions are seen as more durable. So then people argue about affordability. They're often arguing about time, horizon, short-term costs versus long-term outcome, immediate strain versus future growth. Neither side is arguing from pure fantasy. You know, they are weighing risks differently, though, right? If policy associates with modern left were fully implemented, the country would likely look different in several ways if we could just get along. Government programs would expand, healthcare access might increase, though public systems or subsidies, education, social services would receive more funding. Immigration policy would likely emphasize pathways to legal status. And humanitarian protections, supporters believe this leads to a more inclusive society with reduced inequality. Critics agree that risks higher taxes, longer defects, and bureaucratic inefficiencies. If policy associated with the modern political right were fully implemented, the country would also change significantly. Immigration enforcement would increase, border restrictions would tighten, government spending on social programs would likely decrease or shift towards state control. Economic policies would favor deregulation and private sector solutions. Supporters believe this creates stronger economic incentives, lowers taxes, and clears national boundaries. Critics argue it risks reducing the safety nets, and greater inequality. The reality is that the United States has rarely operated at either extreme historically. Policy moves back and forth between these approaches: expansion followed by correction, generosity followed by restraint. The system was designed that way, not to eliminate disagreement, but to slow change. One reason conflict feels sharper now is that compromise has become less visible. Media and online discussions reward certainty. Nuance looks weak in the headlines. So people increasingly hear one side only the strong versions of each argument. The most generous versions of the other side rarely get airtime, right? It's not equal. Another factor is scale. The country is larger, more connected, and more economically complex than previous decades. Policies that once affected millions now affect hundreds of millions. Mistakes feel bigger, consequences feel faster. So who's right? In reality, that question rarely has a clean answer. Every policy involves trade-offs: more openness, increased diversity, and a labor supply. But that can strain the system if growth outpaces planning. More restrictions preserves stability, but can reduce flexibility and economic growth. The debate is not between good and bad intentions. It's between different fears: fear of instability and fear of exclusion, right? What the country ultimately looks like depends on balance. Too much expansion without limits risks financial and institutional strain. Too much restriction risks stagnation and social division. Most durable systems land somewhere in between. The difficulty today is not that Americans disagree. It's that many no longer agree with what success looks like. Is success maximum opportunity, maximum stability, maximum freedom, maximum fairness? Different answers produce different policies. The future of the country will likely not resemble either political extreme. It will resemble renegotiation, messy imperfection, something frustrating, right? Negotiation, because the United States has historically moved forward not by one side winning permanently, but by both sides preventing the other side from going too far. Understanding that does not eliminate disagreement, but it explains why people looking at the same problem can reach completely different conclusions and still believe that they are acting in the country's best interest. In that tension, it's uncomfortable. And as uncomfortable as it is, has always been part of how our country functions. And you can't change that. So that's Brooks Talks. Thanks for joining me. And I appreciate you guys. If you would like to add anything to the conversation, now's your chance. I'll give it about 5 minutes for shut this off. I will also be back tonight around 9 o'clock my time, California time. And we'll breach some other subjects. I am just spreading the wings of the channel a little bit by coming on through a different program than my phone, and using that as an opportunity to hopefully touch more people. So I'm seeing the chat's pretty quiet, so we'll wrap it up. I want to thank Debbie, of course, for her loyalty. She's got to be the most loyal person to this channel that we have. I appreciate her. She's been with us since the beginning, and I'm sure she'll be with us until the end. So I'll cut it off here, and I want to thank for listening. We'll see you tonight. Bye. I'm Brooke. This is Brooke Rose Talks. Yes, Brooke. Of course, Debbie. That's wonderful. Thanks for listening, Deb. I appreciate it. I am going to put this out in a video form where people, if they want to do it, I think if people would actually listen to what I'm saying and what it's about. It's very frustrating when you have people that are so divided in the country. You know that both sides basically wants what's good for the country. Where the hardest part is neither side can see the other side's point. Personally, when it comes to a lot of things, I lean to the right, and I don't understand the youth that are left wing, what they want. I don't know what their goal is. I don't know what they're trying to achieve. I don't know what it looks like if we stop deporting people. And I don't think that they know what it looks like either. And that's the scary part. We know what it looks like if you don't. There was a time in history where they literally stopped immigration for, I think it was 20 years. It was a long time because the country was out of control and they needed to get things back together again. So they stopped it. They paused it for a long time, got the country back together again, got immigration under control, then reopened it. It might be the time to do that again, but time will tell. I'm old. This is your guys' problem now. I screwed up the country enough. You guys got to fix it. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks. I'm Brooke. Bye. Bye, Debbie. Oop.